and you want to make sure you build the connections, there's always everybody tell you one thing. It's not about who you are. It's not about what you know. It's about who you know.
Welcome back to the Get Stuff Done podcast. I'm Gordon Dudley, and today I'm really glad to be joined by Tracy Ho. She is a personal branding and image consultant who is certified in business etiquette and multicultural communication. She's also a certified Gallup Clifton StrengthsFinder coach, originally from Hong Kong, but a multi-country experienced person and somebody who I originally met in Denmark many years ago. We've also been able to have some projects together in our work. She set up her own company called Frame and Fame. Originally, she graduated from the University of Hong Kong in economics and finance, but she has been pursuing this path of personal branding and image consultancy, now based out of Dubai. But we can talk about her globe-trotting international experience in this episode. Tracy, thanks so much for being a guest today.
Hi, Gordon. Thank you very much for having me. And it's so interesting to hear how you introduced me, particularly, how we met. It was, more than a decade ago. Can you imagine?
Yeah, well over a decade. It's getting on for a decade and a half now. So let me get straight in with the question that I like to ask all my guests who come on the podcast, and then we'll go into kind of more details on your journey. But getting stuff done, what does that mean to you, and how do you go about doing that on a daily basis?
Well, right. This is a very interesting question. Getting stuff done. I must say that I am not the quickest executor, and as you introduced myself as a Gallup strength coach, it also triggers me. It was one of the reasons that triggered me to understand strengths coaching, because then I realized my strength was not on execution. My strength has always been on communications and relationship building. But then I realized, okay, when I self reflect, how I get stuff done, I would then motivate others, I would build relationships, and I get stuff done much better when I'm in team format versus when I'm by myself. And tactically, every day, how would I get stuff done? I like to be with my team, and we will set systems. If that's not a system in place, say, for example, a weekly meeting or a monthly review, catch up with clients, then it will not happen. So then my way to get stuff done is don't overcomplicate it, simplify things, and make sure things in the calendar. So then it will happen when we show up. Then the second thing is also I have a adopted, I call it 2 week plan. So then I don't plan too far ahead. Speaking of scheduling and getting stuff done,
Okay.
but then I look ahead every 2 weeks. So by every Monday, every Tuesday, when I finish my day, I look into the calendar what's next in coming 2 weeks. So I prepare in advance, either myself or my team or even my family, whatever needed to do stuff done professionally and personally.
And how do you balance that? You mentioned the personal and professional side. I know you've got 2 children, so you're a working mum, and how do you find the balance of that kind of coming out in your general working week?
Huh. As we speak, for example, this morning I had my daughter had high fever again at 40 degrees Celsius. So what I did, you experienced, I needed to over communicate. I guess when it happens that we need to be adaptive, sometimes juggle around, and also work with the persons that got in a team or partnering with, or even like asked this morning, I need to give you a heads up, hey, this is happening. Can I have 15 more minutes? So I think that built some sort of certainty with the persons or the parties that I work with. I must say that I do not have any, strict steps to follow as a working mom, because I know I'm at my best when I'm adaptive. I try to go with the flow more instead of saying, "Hey, I must do this, I must do that," because with young daughters in the house, sometimes things happen interestingly, right? Then I need to either do something first or delay any other things. And good thing is I run my own business, so my clients, my team, they know in advance what I am the status I'm facing. So then they will be a lot more understanding when little hiccups happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, which only really parents fully understand. We always want to have a schedule. We want to try to organize, and I think children also need a schedule, right, to a certain
Yeah.
extent because of expectations and such. Not to mention the support team that you have around to help that, but also at the same time, the adaptiveness is absolutely crucial because there are always unexpected things happening. And if we stick too rigidly to a schedule just for the sake of the schedule, then we're probably, just make ourselves more stressed and ultimately, we kind of maybe over it evolves. Like, maybe I see people being a bit more strict with schedule with their first child, and then a little bit realizing that the schedule isn't everything when it comes to the second. But you mentioned a 2 week window that you work with, and I'm curious, was that a trial and error kind of thing that you came to find that 2 week is the kind of ideal length of time, or was it something that you have always done, even prior to running your own business?
It's a great question. Looking back, I started this habit when I was in my previous job as a corporate communications consultant. At that time, I was then heading the Singapore Southeast Asia business, so I was pulled apart every single day. I'm not joking, from great business meeting, press conference, to all the way hiring, training, school talks, or even working with the janitor in the house to make sure the office is in place. So there was lots of things happening every single day. And then at that time, the company gave me a coach to talk about efficiency and how to work things better. It was a very good conversation. I still remember the main takeaway I really implemented right away. Since that time, it was 2014. So it's like 10 years. And she said, look at, year thing of two. What does that mean? Like two, you make sure you work 2 days in advance on really like items, and then plan 2 weeks in advance, and also looking ahead 2 months in advance on like big things. So to me, of course, I still have 2 month plan, 2 days ahead, but the most efficient or effective tip that I implemented is this 2 week window. So then I know what's happening. It's not too far away, but it's good enough that I can plan my resources, work around client meetings, team trainings. I think specifically when my girls came to my life, then this 2 week window is really, really important, because then, as you know, right, we need to manage a lot of resources internally to make sure we can show up at work.
Yeah, definitely, and I guess that is something that most people go through from being individual contributor in earlier in their career. You've got to just manage yourself, but increasingly, as we go through our lives, we have to manage more and more people, and then, of course, once you become a leader of leaders, then you're ensuring that the people that you're managing are managing their people well, right? So and I think that's a very different type of skill set. And I think that rule of two is interesting. One thing that I did, I think already last year, was default meeting schedule 30 minutes. I changed it to 20 minutes. And all of a sudden, it didn't need, basically meetings that just because they were 30 minutes went to 30 minutes, right? That kind of classic work expands to fill the time given, right? And we made them 20 minutes by default. And so sometimes we finish now in 15 minutes. Actually, they don't need to all be that length of time. So that's something that I would say people to take a look at. If your meeting default is an hour, look at it maybe 45 minutes, and you'll be amazed that you actually get the same things done in that shorter, less amount of time. So yeah, that's an interesting one, and I'm glad that you also, of course, have the longer 2 month, which I think is interesting because 3 months sometimes feels a bit long, right? 90 days sometimes does feel a bit long, whereas 2 months, 8 weeks does. So I think I personally might take a look at whether I can implement some of those things as well. So, Tracy, you're a certified business etiquette and multicultural communication specialist. I guess that, and I mean, I know you personally and have done for many years. So I know that you are incredibly adaptable with your communication. But tell me a little bit more about how you go about bringing that to other people, and what do you see as some of the things which people need to be aware of when it comes to multicultural communication?
All right. This is an interesting thing you really bring this up, particularly we literally met in a third country. You know, you're from UK, I'm from Hong Kong. We met in Denmark in our company that time. I think that was part of the seeds planted in me when I was I when we started as a management trainee in a global company, right? And we were in the same training together. At that time, I'm sure you would remember there were prejudice, there were miscommunications, there were even like some interesting moments. We still love it, 15, 16 years later. And then when I was in uni, I was in an international student-run organization as well. So then multiple experiences gave me a very strong feeling that there are some gaps yet to be closed, even in 2024. So then, when I want to pursue more and more on my communications profession, then I was identifying some gaps. What can I do, and what can I offer help? And multicultural communication comes very strongly inside me because I immediately flashback some moments when I still remember I was in Kenya, 22 2005, and then I was in a student conference at that time. We were like literally sitting on the floor in the middle of nowhere waiting for bus. And to me at that time, wow, when will the bus come? And then the Kenya people say, hey Tracy, it's normal, just 30 minutes, come on. And imagine if it is in Asia, 30 minutes delayed, the bus going nowhere, then someone's gonna be responsible, right? I mean, multiple examples like that happened in my life, not only in a conference setting, personal setting, also in work settings. When we are in, for example, multi-country projects, how to get stuff done, how to align, how to make sure objectives are met, then very often it gets down to a few gaps. Communications are always one of the primary gaps that among multicultural teams why they cannot meet the expectation. So that's why I took the time during COVID to take this training and development
Mhm.
for myself to understand how I can be a better coach from a communication perspective. I identify diplomacy, international communications, business etiquette as the key areas for me to develop. So then after COVID, I'm now, I start offering a lot more multicultural communications, speaking from, as a Hong Konger, as a, international melting pot in Dubai, Middle East, and also I have a lot of clients and work experience in Europe as well.
Right.
It's not the tradition East meet West or West meet East. It's a little tongue twisting. But what I mean is, as when I'm in Dubai, I realize, in fact, there are a lot of very interesting unspoken protocols that you're expected to communicate, perform, or act and react. And being in Dubai, it's also part of my journey, forcing myself to offer a much better view to my clients. Okay, if you are doing business, imagine if you are from UK and then you're coming to Asia, what you want to communicate, or someone from like Hong Kong, Singapore, we are very, very, get onto it. And when you start launching your business, when you start communicating in Dubai, What would you say? Last month, I had a Hong Kong delegation. They were coming to Dubai for some business meeting, and then I was lining it up, and then one of the key persons in the team, he said, "Hey Tracy, we need to sign these documents. We need to get this agreement done, and I will give you a day." To be honest, if it is in Hong Kong, Singapore standard, I was like, sure, definitely, you can do it. And in Dubai, I was then mediating and trying to explain the cultural differences, what they need to do before, during, and after the first meeting to get stuff done. It's not easy.
Right.
It's about relationship building. It's about showing your sincerity, and also to pick who is the real decision maker. You may not find it easily in the first meeting, from my experience in the Middle East culture. So
Sure.
then, to answer your question short, is that I see this is really a gap that we are still experiencing every day from different perspectives, and professionally and personally. That's why
Mm.
being a multicultural communication coach or specialist or consultant, I hope to help clients get stuff done easier.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I fully agree with you. I think we maybe feel that we're in a very globalized world because it's so easy to communicate with anybody through multiple channels, and there's a certain amount of global news and global events which are shared, and that gives us a sense that we're all connected. But just like you say, when it comes down to actually doing business and getting stuff done, things are done very differently in different parts of the world. And I think a large part of it, like you mentioned, is expectation management. Definitely, the speed at which things are done in Hong Kong, similar to here in Korea. Everything done as quickly as possible doesn't necessarily work in other parts. Tell me about Dubai as a business place. What is the it's I mean it's definitely a melting pot, but what is the predominant kind of business environment that's currently happening in Dubai?
Oh, that's a I was literally telling my one of my friends came from Hong Kong the other day. It's like Hong Kong or New York on steroid. Okay,
Okay.
I'm from a very fast paced market, but I must say
Yep.
that being in downtown Dubai, you see there are just thousands of events every single day, and then you will be standing, no matter how tall you are, there are just skyscrapers in front of you every single street. Okay, so you're like lost in the jungle in that sense. It could be overwhelming, and but interestingly, as I mentioned, it looks fast. It's so dynamic, and there are many more opportunities. I think particularly in the current economic and geopolitical situation, there are just many more people, workforce funds coming into the Middle East, particularly Dubai as a hub. And so that's why
Mhm.
every single day you feel you need to catch up. Okay, where with this, where with that. Then, but interestingly, when you really get stuff done, it's a different pace. So then, I would say it's a you're on a Formula. You feel like you're in a Formula One, circuit, but
Okay.
reading a novel and having the time to chill out. You know what I mean? So it's like fast and slow together, uh,
Got it.
and feel it. Don't expect things really get done fast, even your surrounding is like this. I hope that makes sense, but this is what I feel.
Yeah. Okay. And how is the infrastructure for business? I mean, in terms of broad range of services and suppliers that are available, which obviously much more longer established cities have, very good networks and diverse industries. How is that in Dubai?
Uh, if you understand, I'm not a very, a big expert on Dubai, but then they have around 5 decades of history, right? And things go very fast pace. And then there's a single here, there's a Dubai speed, particularly on the infrastructure perspective. When they want to build something, they get the bill. And then next week we come back, the city looks different. And but when things get moving, it is very fast. And I see that Dubai has done multiple steps to make sure it really connects with the international markets. Right before I came, they really aligned their calendar, and then they do a lot less traditions from like Ramadan. You can still do business, you can still hang out, you can still see people working and in different places during Ramadan, and then they have a little bit of international festivals in the city as well. And you see, from airport, coffee shops, malls, offices, so on the street, you see people from different parts of the world. So then, this is
Okay.
definitely a very, you know, big international
Melting
melting
pot.
pot. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of business etiquette specifically,
Mm,
I'm always very interested with international organizations who, when they have a branch overseas, whether their origin, like headquarter country, whether those customs values are created and being lived in those different countries. The case for Korea, of course, is that it's incredibly homogenous society. And so even the global companies that you find in Korea are still very Korean,
mm,
relatively speaking. How is it in Dubai?
mm. In Dubai, there are many companies, as far as I know and experienced, international. For example, a global company, they have a branch or regional hub in Dubai, and uh,
Mm,
and then if you don't know, one of the fun facts is that 90% of the population is or from overseas, migrants or expats, whatever you want to say.
90%.
Yeah, only 10% in the UAE is local. So then you can see how international it is, and different countries, different people, they are sort of in different space. So then they own it. Particularly like in the business perspective, we see a lot of Europeans, British primarily, and Germans. They are really dominating the business scene, and then I think what is interesting for Dubai is that they are very welcoming. They welcome these international standards to be in place. I think that is why they catch up very fast as well. But of course, everybody who start working Dubai, you must comply to some sort of local Emirati etiquette. Like I mentioned, be respectful and understand the hierarchy. And there are a lot of unspoken protocols everywhere, and you want to make sure you build the connections. There's always everybody tell you one thing. It's not about who you are, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. So it's very, very important. Even they operate in a transparent global standard and international hub. But again, there are a lot of local practices, etiquette in place. So if you want to come to Dubai, you are expected to understand or at least experience it. Give yourself like 2 3 months to experience it
mm,
instead of trying to force things to go through.
okay. And specifically on gender equality, because it's a huge issue in Korea. Korea's always coming up within the OECD countries as the lowest in terms of female representation, with the glass ceiling that the Economist magazine publishes. How is that specifically in the Dubai business environment?
Hmm. Uh, uh, I'm not in a very good position to tell it's the whole picture, right? What I can share is some personal experience. I would say that before I went to Dubai, I asked the same question. I'm an Asian lady. Can I really, build a voice there?
Yeah.
It is doable. It's possible, and then you will find a lot of people willing to help. What I can experience as an expatriate myself, one of the 90%, that you will see that people are very, very helpful here because we are all here to survive, right? So then you can get connections, get support from the expatriate group pretty easily. And then there are lots of informations elsewhere. And I also see that there are a lot more middlemen when I found in Dubai versus Korea and Hong Kong. example. It
Okay.
reminds me of, going to mainland China, the second tier, third tier city in the 90s. So you want a middleman to connect you to resources. Similarly,
I
that
see.
happens in Dubai. But then one of the experience
Okay.
I got, it's COP28. So if you know that COP28 happened in Dubai in December, then we see that from what I observed, the UAE government, the UAE is really trying to build that gender diversity up on the global scene. As you can see, that not only uh, the chairman is a man, but then you see the core team, they always have a female representation there, and then on the whole COP, you can see there it's a lot of emphasis on inclusion, on gender diversity, on ethnic diversity. So this is something I can see UAE playing a bigger role on the world scene.
Okay. Okay. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the ease of doing business index, which comes out. It's basically a kind of country ranking,
Mm,
a number of factors around how easy it is for foreign business to set up in a particular country. And I don't know where Dubai features on that scale, but just from your experience, because I know you visited many countries and many countries you've even kind of worked in, and it's been business trips as well. So you have a bit of a sense of the business environment across different regions.
mm.
Where would you say is for you the most challenging place to do business that you've encountered?
I think that the level of difficulty also connects to language and your upbringing.
Hmm.
I mean, thankfully, I speak three languages, maybe three and a half. So I speak Cantonese, Mandarin, English, and a little bit of Spanish. And so why I'm saying this, because sometimes when I'm not dealing with many parties in Dubai, then I can't speak Arabic, and that is a barrier. Language
Okay.
definitely is a barrier, and even we hire middlemen, but still there will be some barriers. And for example, when the legal documents, everything, they officially still recognize Arabic instead of English. Because from where I'm from, I was in Hong Kong, Singapore, UK, or even when we're in Musk in Copenhagen, English was, has been always been like a primary language, right? So then Dubai is also, taking English very seriously. But when you sign something, you still need to sign a Arabic document. So then that gives a sense of suddenly I realize, oh, it is something I'm not very aware of or I don't know, right? So
Hmm.
then language definitely is a barrier. The geographical location can also be a different another area. Say when I was in working in mainland China. And Shanghai, Beijing is definitely a lot easier. But when you need to go inland, it's like
Yeah.
in UAE now. When you want to move from places to places, then the geographical locations or sometimes travels or transportation definitely is not easy. When I was in Singapore, I need to cover Southeast Asia. Then I must say that some cities like uh, Jakarta or KL, then the traffic will really give us a lot of uncertainty in terms of business setup. And
Hmm.
uh, so I would say that it's a lot easier if we have the common language and and then an extensive underground or train system works a lot more, and also the transparency in terms of regulations. So I found it a lot easier in Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, US, UK. You can find things printed and recorded and followed easily, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes some countries they may not have that same kind of governance
Right.
practice. So that
Yeah.
again generates some sort of challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I agree with you again because it's like David Friedman's spiky world, right? The world's not flat.
Mm,
Spiky meaning the global cities around the world have more in common with each other than they do to their local domestic places, right? Seoul to somewhere like Gwangju is more different than Seoul to Hong Kong,
Yes.
and then Hong Kong to mainland China. So yeah, I fully agree with that. Um, and in terms of etiquette, I'm just curious. When we think about faux pas with etiquette. Often we think about Bill Gates when he came
Mm,
to Korea and he met the president with his hand in his pocket, and this was a huge kind of political faux pas. Seen as almost an insult, but nobody knows whether it was intentional or not. Have you got any kind of good stories around people who have just done completely the wrong thing, maybe unintentionally, and then it's had some consequences?
Uh, there are a lot of stories, particularly on the ground, in the international stage that may be less. But for example, my own experience, you may not see people shake hands that often with the locals. They don't shake hands. So then I remember, my first month in Dubai, I was in some business meeting, and I was in a meeting with a local Emirati, and then I just, very naturally, I raise my hands and I want to shake. And you can see the face of that person hesitate a little, like, oh, should I not? And then, so at that time, I was like, oh, did I cross the line or something as well? And once I know more, okay, they may not shake hands that easily, years ago. But again, Dubai now is a lot more different than the previous days or the other, Emirates or the Gulf region. But I also see that whether you want to have a dinner or some meal first, like meeting first or dining first. Okay,
Right.
some cultures prefer to eat first. Some cultures prefer to meet first and work first. I think you and I come from a more culture on the work and meet first, and then we can socialize, get a beer, in a bar, and so on. But
Yeah.
where I am now in Dubai or some Asian countries as well, I think I know some African countries as well. They appreciate some sort of not only small talks. They like to have a dining experience to mingle and everybody build some relationships and bonding before you even have the first meeting. That
Yeah.
in a
Definitely.
sense, show the host want to show the welcoming and build relationship. But then as I mentioned, I saw some companies came in and they said, no, I don't want to have lunch first. Can we have a meeting first? So then we'll explain. Okay, in fact, you want to have lunch first. You don't want to have that meeting yet. So then this is another thing I've seen pretty easily here and even in Asia. Then sometimes also gifting is an interesting area that
Yes.
you want to make sure, for example, what you cannot send to others. Say, for
Yes.
example, I remember years ago, we received in Hong Kong at that time I was working in, we received a very beautiful antique clock from a banking client in the West. Then at that time, some of my managers they were like, "Oh," and then why? Because when you give someone else a clock as a gift in Hong Kong or Guangzhou or Cantonese speaking region, is a taboo because it's like it's the it sounds or the pronunciation of it meaning that it's to give something for that man, like a funeral or something like that. So then,
Okay.
because the word clock in
So,
Cantonese, it means the end. So it like the end of life or something like
it's
that. So then
okay.
gifting
So
is
it's
an
a real big
interesting thing.
no-no.
Yeah, you don't want
Yeah.
that. Particularly if you want to imagine you want to build a relationship with a with a
Yep.
Cantonese speaking company CEO, then you don't want to send
Yep.
him or her a
Right.
clock.
Or white flowers. And so in Korea, white flowers is for a funeral.
Yeah.
White flowers can be very classy. They don't just have to be for a wedding. They can easily be gifted. But in Korea, white flowers means funeral. So also don't do that. Now, I mean, I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it goes back to what we're saying about us feeling like we're in a globalized world with a kind of global business environment, but still ways of doing things differently. I mean, even just the handshake is a great example. Do you handshake someone at arm's length, still
Mm,
standing basically, 1.5 meters apart? Do you stand, kind of close to them, extending your hand relatively close, but still plenty of gap between? Or in some cultures, you basically your hand shaking, but you stood right in front of them, so you can almost kind of like be right in front of them, and your hand is not extended as well. So I mean, yeah, that exists. I think gifting also is a very interesting one as well, especially in Northeast Asia. There was a big law that came in a few years ago in Korea against to try to limit that,
mm,
and so I definitely see, there's still a lot of gift culture that goes on in business in Korea, but then incredibly strict regulations coming from some global companies where they literally can't accept anything more than $10 in value, otherwise it can cross the line of their kind of international policy. So it's a really interesting topic, and like you said, also about the food, right? I mean, sometimes the international clients want to move quickly. Let's get stuff done. Let's get straight into business. But if you do that, there's not going to be any business. Nothing's, it's not going to go anywhere. So ultimately, you're going to fail. So it's like investing in the relationship in order to actually accomplish. There's an unwritten rule in Korea about having 10 interactions
mm.
before any kind of actual business is done. Um, so, I mean, I think it might be the greatest conflict. Like, let's get down to business. People
Yeah.
feeling if you've done small talk for 1 minute about the weather, that's enough. Let's get down to business, as opposed to meeting for hours and really building a relationship, and then at a comfortable point discussing about whether there will be some business or not. So yeah, it's definitely, I think we need more people like you to help navigate the this world of doing business globally. You mentioned language about being a barrier.
Mm,
And it's a well known fact that when people speak different languages, they take on certain different personality traits, almost a different kind of character. And
mm.
I'm curious about you, Tracy. Of course, I only know you in English. I haven't had a chance to observe you in your native Cantonese. But personally speaking, what are some of the differences that you feel that you have when you are operating in Cantonese, Mandarin, Spanish, or English?
True story. When I was in my previous job, I was then managing one of my new teammates. So then it's my direct report. So I was speaking with her in Cantonese. Usually
Okay.
in the workspace, we are required to speak in English, but at that time it was so like urgent things. And then so I spoke fast. I spoke Cantonese, and then of course at that time my team at the time, okay, she kept nodding. Then that was a scene. I was nowhere feeling anything went wrong, okay? But then it was brought up in my
In that
monthly
moment.
meeting. Yeah, in that moment, it was
Yeah.
then
Okay.
brought up by my boss at that time in my monthly meeting, and he came in pretty strongly. He said, "Why would you undermine your staff? Why would you be that angry? Why would you speak with her that rude and impolite language?" I was like, "What happened? What happened?" And then
Yeah.
I still remember we were in the Starbucks, have that monthly meeting, and then I was talking in Cantonese to the cashier, and then suddenly he realized, maybe because of your tone. So then at the end, we talk it through. He thought I was being rude with my colleagues in Cantonese, but I was not aware that would be an issue because in English we are like a lot more intonation. And then in
Okay.
Cantonese, although we have nine sort of sound in one word, but then usually we have a lot, lower intonation, like even monotone when we speak Cantonese. Mandarin, you
Okay.
also, do a lot more, intonations and it like singing
Okay.
as well. But only in Cantonese, it sounds like you're scolding or arguing with others. So that's one of my own experience. I still, since he
Right.
talked about it, I got a lot more aware. Oh yes, Cantonese is, it looked like arguing at that front. Then when I'm only speaking intermediate level in Spanish, but then with Spanish it's a lot more adjective describing the word. So then in English you
Okay.
say one sentence, but then maybe it's like, oh, Tracy is wearing a jacket, which is feminine jacket, which is red, which is fit. So everything is also adjective to words. So then to me, it's a lot longer, the sentence. And and then my teacher also told me that it's a lot more expressive language. So you want to uh, make sure we express that. I'm not a very good Spanish speaker, but that is what I understand. And
Yeah.
in Mandarin, it's for example, it's Chinese speaking, right? And then Cantonese speaking and writing is different. But in Mandarin, speaking and writing more or less the same. So then it will be a lot easier for foreigners to catch or learn, at least the beginners level. But again, when you go to
Okay.
dialect, I think it's different, and then it sort of
Yeah.
sometimes draw people. When I saw you, when I met you in Copenhagen, it was not my first international trips or experience. I remember my first time being in Europe. It was, I had a job in Belgium, and then I was chit chatting with my colleagues in lunchtime, and I found I was not a humorous person. I couldn't tell a single joke. I can't. I mean, I would interact. I like socialize, but I couldn't say anything that make people laugh. I myself see myself as uh, a more like a dynamic, lively person, and I
Yep.
like to
Yep.
make jokes as well. But
Yep.
yeah, in my first encounter, it was my first job in Brussels at that time. I couldn't. So then, and since then, I
Right.
realized, there's a difference also between like spoken language, dialect, and as well as you want to speak colloquially, right? And then and sort of like
Right.
book language, business language, because then
Yeah.
if you speak too many business talk, no matter what language you are, then you build a wall naturally. Maybe you don't realize it. So then, from a speaking of etiquette or getting stuff done perspective, the language
Definitely.
is so beautiful that you want to master it by talking, written, business, book, and also social language.
Yeah. Totally, and I mean, I would put humor as another category on top of that. I mean, if you can be humorous in a foreign language, then you're definitely at mastery of that language. I believe because it is so. It takes a high level of linguistic ability, but it takes so much cultural nuance to understand what would be funny. I've been in Korea for 14 years. Sarcasm is not really a thing in Korea. I am, in my own native language, a relatively sarcastic person. So I've had to kind of, uh, you know, downplay that over the years. I would say personally, the thing that I've maybe changed the most of my communication style is about the ratio of speaking to listening. So,
Yes.
in a hierarchical environment like Korea, on the whole, where if you are not the most senior person in the room, then you're not expected to speak more than that senior person. And it just made me reflect a little bit on myself that perhaps this ratio of two ears to one mouth is a good way of thinking about things. That if we listen more and speak a little bit less, at least somebody who's very talkative, like myself, then in fact we can perhaps learn more. We can be a bit more effective in what we want to do because you think first, you process, and then you speak. There was a really good exercise that we did in one of the trainings when in one of my former companies where the facilitator asked us to just have a discussion on a topic. It was like a geopolitical topic. We discussed it, I think, for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then they said, okay, now write down everything that everybody said. And like, well, how on earth are we going to do that? But we did our best to try to remember what everybody had said. And of course, there were some people in that 15 minutes who had spoken a lot.
Mm.
There were some people who had not spoken at all. And there were some people who had spoken a little. And of course, the people who spoke a lot, no one could remember everything that they had said. So effective,
Mm.
like what we're saying is how much had they communicated and been actually heard? Like 50%. The people who had said nothing, of course, they didn't contribute at all, so they're also out of the picture. The people who spoke a little, people were reflecting and being able to recollect 100% of what they said. So in terms of their communication effectiveness is 100%. So I think that was a very kind of meaningful exercise for me that I still remember to this day. I guess when you're helping people, you also do these kind of exercises and techniques to help people improve in this kind of way.
Yes, I like that. I will, perhaps incorporate that sort of idea to some of my communications training. When it comes to communications coaching training or workshops I've been doing, I always tell clients or the participants the very first thing I would say ground rules. It's the more you speak, or I would now say the more you listen, the more you get. Because when communication, you can't just read. It's like can you learn swimming by looking at YouTube videos? Maybe you can tell principles, but when you dive into the water, oh my God, it's different thing. So
Yeah,
similarly, in
yeah.
communications, we deploy a lot of tools in our training, coaching sessions, group or one-on-one. I like to use more engaging tools. It could be as easy as levels. So I use a lot of blocks to help clients to structure their thoughts literally. And I have my run my 6 blocks communication training. It's a very easy tool, but then it can have lots of variation to bring that conversations either one person, two people, or in group perspective. How they communicate, what's the mode they listen or they speak, how they give instructions, how they respond, how they react. Then we also use visual facilitation tools. There's always a role to play by post-its and flip charts and markers. So then if you give me free tools, I can run whole day sessions right away because it generates a lot of creativity. My experience is the more useful tool is those who are less restrictive. Like if you give a very standard systems and people need to follow, then the creativity is really impact. By a blank Canva, post-it, flip chart, Lego, that sort of tools that is very adaptive and for people to play with. Then no matter where you're from, what sort of communications, language level you are at, or academic level, intellectual level, you can still play with so you don't feel undermined by if I give you a deck of instructions to read, then you feel, oh, do I need to read it word by word? So then the less descriptive, the less restrictive, the better the tools.
It's an interesting one, and I want to just pick that up and go into a little bit more detail because I fundamentally agree. That's where I'm coming from.
Mm,
If you allow the people to free think, they will be able to interpret it in their own way.
yeah.
We can then have a look at that, and that will be the basis for being able to kind of get some takeaways and something to work on. But with Korean groups, I've found that, contrary to my own natural intention, I need to make the instructions and the rules much more explicit
Mm,
and much more well defined.
mm,
If I don't, there is a huge period of like freezing where no
mm,
one knows what to do, and then it generates questions upon questions upon questions of questions. Or how about the moments? Whereas if the rules and the instructions are very, for me, relatively speaking, excessive,
mm,
that somehow creates a comfort
mm,
with regards to the work to be done,
mm,
and that comfort allows the creativity to come.
mm. Yes,
So
it's a very good observations you brought that up, Gordon. That refreshes some of my experiences as well. Maybe I share a
yeah,
little bit of my
it's
experience on that.
sure.
Yeah, it's when I was in Singapore, okay, we ran, coaching or, client meeting as well. And I realized particularly the last generation, right? Not the current vibrant generation in Singapore. They really like what we call SOP, standard operation procedures. So when you work with them, when you meet them, you try to coach or facilitate. You want to give them some SOP. We always say, okay, that means like even a document, a one pager to line laid out some steps for them to follow. Or after the training, after they have the meeting, they expect to have a one pager as well to take away literally. So then they
Yes.
feel secured. Okay,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
and Hong Kong as well. I think it really goes back to upbringing, education, culture, and I for example for me I do both. I coach and work with schools, universities, companies that are more local or Asian culture versus the
Hmm.
international culture. I give you an example. I run personal branding workshops, and I also do pro bono or schools training sometimes. And then I was in a international school one day. The same week, I was hosting the same workshop on personal branding for career development among high school students, preparing them to go to university. We were invited by both international schools and a traditional elite school in Hong Kong. Same topic, same coach. It's very different dynamic, and we, as you said, we need to be a lot more facilitation. So I think in the
Hmm.
coaching or training perspective, there's a term we also need to master is facilitation, right? Facilitation is not a standard. We cannot SOP it. It's more like you
Yeah.
observe, you listen, and then you react to the participants how to bring the best in them. And
Yeah.
I observe at that time, I just give very basic one-liner sort of question. Then you see hands up, debate, questions, discussions naturally among the those international schools. Then the local ones again, because they are more comfortable with syllabus, exams, practice, and guidance, or even instructions. And sometimes teachers even ask the students just to follow. So in that sort of space, then they are trained to be a lot more cautious. They may have their own thought, but they don't want to say it. They want to wait for someone to say it first. So then the facilitation, we will add a little more warm up interactions, and I may even set ground rules. Everybody needs to speak. So then they say,
Yeah.
okay, fine, I will speak. Uh,
Yes.
it is what it is,
Yes.
I guess.
Permission to speak. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
they would like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, I think that adaptability is what is important for us when we're leading those kind of groups, and it's also what, of course, makes multicultural groups, not just two cultures working together, but situations where there's really multicultural business relations going on. Super interesting, I think, because often in many cases you find out later on. You don't find out at the time that it hasn't worked or that something's wrong. You find out later after the fact, and I guess as long as we take that away and try to improve or avoid that the next time, then we're kind of improving and getting better. Um, what does the immediate future look like for you, Tracy? I know that you are maybe of the people in my network one of the most globally mobile that I know. Tell me what the rest of 2024 and into 2025 looks like for you.
Thank you. Back in the days when I was in my previous job, then I hired myself a coach. And then she asked me a question. It was still very, very, I think it's very intriguing. So then it's very fresh in my memory. She asked me, what do I really want to pursue in my career? And then I was then asked to draw and write. Never ever I say I want to be a C-suite or corporate ladder or a big paycheck. I was hoping to be of help to others. I was still writing about communication, storytelling, and one thing I write down is geographical mobile for me, so I can work and travel as I want. So that's a little vision I mapped out for
Okay.
myself 10 years ago. I'm not saying I achieved that, but slowly I'm building. So as you know, that
Okay.
we started the company in Hong Kong as a base, and sometimes I still have some clients work in Singapore, KL. We travel. Like I flew to Seoul to meet you, some years ago. I think
Yeah.
based in Hong Kong or Singapore, we have a luxury to fly pretty easily. Then I flew myself in parachuting in Dubai. Really want to, strengthen the multicultural and etiquette elements. So then, although I went through the training, although I have the book knowledge, but I don't believe I can teach and consult and coach with ease and confidence without being myself in the Middle East, because that it's like a missing part of my puzzle. So that's why I'm speaking with you, sharing with you here on the Dubai experience. And then in the coming quarter or the second half of this year, I'm finally returning to a place that I really like and enjoy and wanted to be back all the time is Europe. I think that is the reason why we met in Europe in the first place, because I love the culture there, the history, the people. So then I would like to go to UK and set a base there. So then later half this year, you and I can, grab a beer in a bar in UK, and when I hopefully can start, building an additional base, so then I can then fulfill my little dream is geographical mobile, having clients, globally. Thanks to COVID, I think a lot easier nowadays. People are a lot more receptive about being online, being mobile, being remote than 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I also have the same kind of life goal to be geographically mobile. So I guess I respect you for really making it happen. Also, Tracy, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and experiences that you've um, you know, accrued over the years from your experiences. And if people would like to get in touch with you,
Mm.
what would be the best route to get in contact with you?
Sure, the easiest way is LinkedIn. So then you can go to linkedin.com/in/hotracy, HOTRACY, then you can find me. From there, you can connect to my business, our Instagram, all the social media accounts, and even LinkedIn, and book a meeting. So then it's so easy to connect. It's just two steps away, maybe three buttons.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, Tracy, thanks so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks everybody for listening and watching to this episode of the Get Stuff Done podcast. And remember, let's get stuff done.
Definitely.